Ethan Miller always believed his life was complete. Every morning started with the sound of his kids laughing and Lauren humming in the kitchen. He'd grab his coffee, kiss her on the cheek, and head to the garage where he worked. He wasn't rich, but he was proud. His hands were rough, his back ached most nights, but it never mattered because when he came home, two little faces would run to hug him. That was all the reward he ever needed. Lauren and Ethan had known each other since high school. She was the girl who believed in his dreams when no one else did. When he opened his small mechanic shop, she stood by him, helping with bills, cooking late dinners, and keeping the home warm. They built their life together from nothing. For Ethan, every part of that life, the small house, the laughter, the family dinners, was proof that hard work and love could make anything possible. He often told his coworkers how lucky he was. "Some guys work their whole life and still go home to an empty house," he'd say with a proud smile. "Me? I got 2 kids who think I'm a hero and a wife who's been with me through it all." He really believed that. There wasn't a single part of him that questioned it. Weekends were his favorite. He'd fix up old bikes with Noah or take Emma to the park for ice cream. He'd sit on the porch in the evenings, watching them play in the yard while Lauren read on her phone. He'd look around at his life and feel grateful, even for the smallest moments. Ethan wasn't a man of many words, but he always showed his love in actions. He'd stay up late to help Emma with her school projects or make sure Noah's baseball glove was repaired before practice. Every sacrifice he made, every extra hour spent fixing cars, was for them. He didn't care about vacations or fancy things. His joy came from knowing his family was taken care of. At night, when the kids were asleep, he and Lauren would sometimes sit in silence, watching TV or just talking about how fast the kids were growing. He'd joke about how soon Noah would be taller than him, or how Emma had Lauren's stubborn streak. He thought those quiet, ordinary moments were the most beautiful parts of his life. But lately, things had started to feel different, not enough to cause alarm, just small things. Lauren seemed distracted, distant at times. She'd smile, but it didn't always reach her eyes. She'd spend more time on her phone or say she was tired and go to bed early. Ethan thought she was just exhausted from managing the kids and the house. He told himself marriages went through phases and didn't press her about it. Still, sometimes, he caught himself wondering when they'd stopped laughing as much, when her hugs had become quick and half-hearted. But every time those thoughts crept in, he pushed them away. After all, they'd been together for so long. He trusted her completely. He believed in their family. For Ethan, his world was simple: work hard, love deeply, and keep his family safe. He didn't know that beneath the surface of his peaceful life, something was already broken. Something that would soon tear apart everything he thought he knew about love, trust, and family. Everyone in town admired Ethan. People called him the kind of man every family needed: dependable, hardworking, always there for his wife and kids. On weekends, you'd find him at the baseball field, cheering louder than anyone when Noah hit the ball, or sitting in the front row of Emma's dance recitals with flowers in hand. He didn't miss a single event, no matter how tired he was from work. He believed being present was the most important thing a father could do. Lauren often told her friends how lucky she was to have a husband like him. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family: 2 polite kids, a cozy home, and a marriage built on love. Neighbors would wave when they saw them having cookouts in the backyard or decorating their porch for holidays. Ethan took pride in those small moments, thinking they proved he'd done something right with his life. But little things started to change. Ethan noticed Lauren spent more time scrolling on her phone, even during dinner. When he'd ask what she was doing, she'd smile lightly and say, "Just chatting with some old friends." He didn't think much of it at first. After all, everyone needed to unwind sometimes. Still, the changes were hard to ignore. She laughed less. Her hugs felt different, shorter, distracted. Sometimes she'd step outside to take calls and come back acting like nothing happened. Ethan would glance at her, trying to read her face, but she'd just change the subject or tease him about worrying too much. He started to feel a quiet distance between them. It wasn't dramatic or loud, just a slow, steady drift. The warmth they once shared was fading, replaced by small silences that neither of them wanted to talk about. When they sat together on the couch, she'd keep her eyes on the screen, scrolling endlessly while he pretended not to notice. Ethan convinced himself it was normal. After so many years together, maybe love just looked different now, calmer, less passionate. He told himself she was tired, that the kids kept her busy, that he was overthinking. He didn't want to make things worse by bringing it up. He kept doing what he always did: working extra hours, fixing the leaky sink, planning family dinners. He thought if he kept showing up, things would go back to how they used to be. He didn't realize he was the only one still trying. At night, when she'd slip into bed late, smelling faintly of someone else's cologne, Ethan's chest would tighten. He'd tell himself it was just his imagination, that she'd probably been out shopping or meeting a friend. He wanted so badly to believe everything was fine that he ignored the signs right in front of him. The laughter that once filled their home had grown quiet. Yet Ethan still smiled every morning, kissed her on the forehead, and left for work believing tomorrow would be better. What he didn't know was that the life he was fighting to protect had already begun to fall apart, piece by piece, while he was too busy trying to hold it all together. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan sat at the dining table helping Emma with her science project. She had to make a chart showing how blood types are passed down in families. It seemed simple enough until she asked, "Dad, what's your blood type?" Ethan smiled, pretending to think for a second. "I'm O positive, sweetheart," he said proudly. Emma nodded and scribbled it down, then looked up again. "And Mom's A positive, right?" Lauren, who was washing dishes nearby, turned and said, "Yep, that's right." They both went back to helping Emma finish her chart. But when Ethan looked at the paper again, his eyes paused on something that didn't make sense. Emma had written that her blood type was AB. He frowned a little, trying to remember how genetics worked. "Wait," he said softly. "Can someone with O and a parents have AB?" Lauren laughed quickly and said, "Oh, honey, it's just a school project. Don't take it so seriously." Her voice was light, but her back stayed turned. Ethan shrugged it off, though the question kept echoing in his mind. That night, he pulled out his phone and searched it up. The answer hit him harder than he expected. No, it wasn't possible. Not at all. He stared at the screen for a long time, feeling something deep inside him shift. He told himself not to jump to conclusions. Maybe Lauren had remembered her blood type wrong. Maybe there had been a mix-up at the hospital. He tried to push the thought away, but it didn't leave. Over the next few days, he found himself watching Lauren more closely. Every smile, every phone call, every excuse to step outside felt heavier. He didn't want to be suspicious. He hated even thinking that way. But something about that small discovery had opened a door he couldn't close. At work, he caught himself staring blankly at engines, lost in thought. "Maybe I'm being stupid," he whispered to himself while wiping grease from his hands. But then he'd remember the chart, the way Lauren avoided his eyes, and that uneasy feeling would come rushing back. At home, he tried to bring it up gently. "Hey," he said one evening while drying dishes. "You sure your blood type's A positive?" She didn't look up, just said, "Yeah, I think so." "Why?" He mentioned Emma's project, hoping she'd clear it up, but she only shrugged and changed the subject. Her reaction was too casual, almost rehearsed. That small moment told Ethan more than words ever could. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling while Lauren slept beside him. He could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing, calm and peaceful, while his thoughts raced endlessly. He didn't want to believe there was something wrong. He loved her too much for that. But the seed had been planted. Every time he looked at Emma or Noah, that tiny voice whispered again, asking questions he wasn't ready to answer. He tried to silence it, but it grew louder each day, turning love into confusion and trust into quiet fear. He didn't know it yet, but that small science project had changed something forever. Ethan tried to push his doubts away, but they kept coming back stronger every time. He told himself he was just being paranoid, yet something deep down wouldn't let him rest. Every time he looked at his kids, a quiet ache grew in his chest. He still loved them more than anything, but a part of him needed to know the truth. Not because he wanted to stop loving them, but because the not knowing was tearing him apart inside. One evening, while scrolling online, he came across an ad for an at-home DNA test kit. It promised to trace ancestry and family connections. That gave him an excuse, a reason that wouldn't raise suspicion. "Hey," he told Lauren one night, keeping his tone light. "Thought it'd be fun to see where our roots come from. Maybe we've got some Irish or Italian in us." She smiled briefly and said, "Sure, that sounds interesting." A few days later, the kit arrived in a small brown box. Ethan's hands shook slightly as he opened it. He gathered samples from everyone, making it seem like a family game. The kids were excited, laughing as they swabbed their cheeks and asked silly questions. Lauren looked relaxed, completely unaware of the storm building inside him. When he mailed the test, Ethan expected to feel relief. Instead, he felt heavier. The days waiting for the results dragged like months. He'd wake up in the middle of the night, wondering if he was making a mistake. "You're their father," he'd whisper to himself, "no matter what that paper says." But another part of him, the one that remembered Lauren's strange behavior, her late nights, the distance, told him he already knew. The email came on a quiet Sunday morning. Ethan was alone in the garage when his phone buzzed with a notification. His heart pounded as he clicked it open. The screen loaded slowly, every second stretching like forever. And then, in clear black letters, the results appeared. He froze. Emma, not a biological match. Noah, not a biological match. His entire world went silent. The noise from the street, the ticking clock, even his own breathing faded away. He read the words again and again, hoping he had misunderstood. But the truth was there, sharp and cold. 15 years. 15 years of bedtime stories, school projects, scraped knees, hugs, and "I love you, Dad." All built on a lie he never saw coming. His body felt numb. The phone slipped from his hands and hit the floor, but he barely noticed. Tears blurred his vision as he sat on the cold garage floor, memories flooding his mind. Emma's first steps. Noah's first home run. Lauren's smile on their wedding day. All those moments that once made his life beautiful now felt like pieces of a cruel joke. He didn't know how long he sat there. Time didn't matter anymore. The truth had broken something inside him that couldn't be fixed. The man who had always believed in family, in loyalty, in love, now realized that the life he built was never really his at all. Ethan sat in the living room, staring at the DNA report lying on the coffee table. His hands wouldn't stop shaking, even though he tried to steady them. The house felt unusually quiet. Every tick of the clock sounded louder, sharper, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. He knew what he had to do, but he didn't know how to do it without falling apart. When Lauren walked through the door that evening, she looked tired, holding a grocery bag and humming softly. Ethan watched her for a moment, trying to remember when that sound used to make him happy. He didn't feel anger right away, just emptiness. He waited until she set the bags down before speaking. His voice came out calm, almost too calm. "I know, Lauren," he said. "About the kids." She froze. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. Then her face went pale, and her eyes filled with tears. She didn't even ask what he meant. She already knew. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "It wasn't supposed to happen this way." Ethan didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stared at her, trying to see the woman he thought he knew. "Who?" he asked quietly, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. Lauren covered her face, sobbing, and said a name that felt like a knife twisting inside him. "Mark," she whispered. Ethan blinked slowly. "Mark." His mind went blank for a second. Mark was his old friend, someone who'd stood beside him at their wedding, someone he used to trust like a brother. They had known each other since high school. Mark had even come by the house many times over the years, joking with the kids, sitting at Ethan's dinner table. The thought made him sick. Lauren sank into a chair, shaking, unable to look at him. She admitted the affair started not long after their wedding. "It just happened," she said weakly. "I didn't mean for it to go on this long." Ethan stared at her, his heart breaking with every word. Both kids, Emma and Noah, were Mark's. She had carried that lie for 15 years, letting him raise them, letting him believe they were his world. He wanted to ask why. Why she did it. Why she let him live in a lie for so long. But his throat was too tight to speak. He just sat there, his breath unsteady, his body cold. She reached for him, trying to explain, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said quietly. "You don't get to touch me." The silence after that was heavier than any words. The woman he had once loved, the woman he'd trusted more than anyone, was now a stranger sitting in his home. The truth had stripped away everything they had built together. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He packed a small bag and sat on the edge of the bed, watching Lauren cry beside him. The pain was unbearable, but so was staying. He looked around the room, the photos, the memories, the life they had shared, and felt nothing but loss. His heart had been loyal to a dream that never existed. The days that followed felt endless for Ethan. The air inside the house was heavy, filled with silence that used to be laughter. He moved through each room like a ghost, seeing pieces of his old life everywhere he turned. The family photos on the wall that once made him proud now felt like cruel reminders. Every smile, every happy memory, it all looked different now, like it belonged to someone else. Lauren tried to speak to him several times, but he couldn't bring himself to listen. Every word from her felt empty. He didn't yell or argue, he was past that. His anger had faded into something deeper, a quiet kind of heartbreak that words couldn't describe. Sometimes he would just sit on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, wondering how love could turn into this kind of pain. The hardest part wasn't even her betrayal. It was the kids. Emma and Noah still ran to him when he came home, still called him Dad, with the same love as before. They didn't know anything had changed, and that broke him the most. He couldn't look into their eyes without feeling torn in half. They weren't his by blood, but every memory, every scraped knee, every bedtime story, those were his. He had been there for everything. He had loved them more than life itself. One evening, Emma showed him her report card, beaming with pride. "Look, Dad. I got an A," she said, wrapping her arms around him. Ethan hugged her back, forcing a smile, but his throat burned. He wanted to tell her how proud he was, but all he could think about was how none of this was real. At least not in the way he thought it was. Still, in his heart, he knew his love for them was real. It always had been. Lauren started sleeping in the guest room after that. She walked quietly around the house, avoiding his eyes. Sometimes Ethan would hear her crying at night, but he couldn't bring himself to comfort her. The trust between them was gone, and there was no way to bring it back. At work, Ethan tried to act normal, but his coworkers noticed the change. He barely spoke, just kept his head down and focused on fixing cars. The sound of engines and tools was the only thing that helped drown out his thoughts. When customers asked how his family was, he just nodded and said, "They're fine." He couldn't bear to say more. He thought about leaving, about packing a bag and walking away from everything. But every time he tried, he remembered the kids' faces, their voices calling him Dad. That word still meant something to him, even if everything else had fallen apart. It reminded him that love wasn't only about blood. It was about the moments you gave, the care you showed, the promises you kept. Still, every night when he lay down, the weight of it all pressed on his chest. The woman he trusted had destroyed the truth of his life, yet he couldn't hate the two innocent souls who called him their father. That contradiction tore at him day and night. Love mixed with heartbreak, devotion tangled with betrayal. And even though the world he built had crumbled, a small part of him still held on, not for her, but for the children who didn't ask for any of this. Ethan tried to keep things steady for the kids, but inside he was falling apart. Every morning felt heavier than the last. He'd wake up, hear Lauren moving around the house, and feel a rush of anger and sadness all at once. The woman he once trusted with everything now looked like a stranger. He couldn't understand how she could eat breakfast, smile, and act like their life hadn't just crumbled. For a while, he avoided her as much as he could. He focused on the kids, making sure they didn't feel the tension that hung in the air. But Lauren's calm attitude started to bother him. She spoke as if nothing serious had happened, as if what she'd done could be brushed under the rug for the sake of family. One night after dinner, when the kids had gone to their rooms, she looked at him and said, "Ethan, we need to move on, for the kids." Her tone was firm, almost cold. Ethan stared at her, unable to believe what he was hearing. Move on? As if 15 years of lies could be erased so easily? He searched her face for any sign of guilt, any sign that she truly understood what she'd done, but there was none. She wasn't sorry. She just didn't want her comfortable life to change. That was the moment something inside him snapped. The quiet, patient man who had always put others first finally realized there was nothing left to save. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just stood up and walked to their bedroom. He took a small suitcase from the closet and began packing his clothes. Lauren followed him, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He zipped up the bag, looked around the room one last time, and said, "I'm done pretending." His voice was calm, but his heart was breaking. "You wanted me to move on, Lauren." "I am." She begged him to stay, saying they could fix it, but Ethan knew the truth. There was no fixing something built on lies. He looked her in the eyes one last time and said, "You took away the only thing that mattered, trust. There's nothing left after that." Then he walked out of the home he had built with his own hands. He moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a single bedroom, a kitchen, and a window that overlooked a quiet street. But for the first time in months, he could breathe. He didn't answer Lauren's calls or messages. The divorce papers were filed quietly. He didn't want to fight. He wanted peace. Still, peace didn't come easily. Nights were the hardest. The silence reminded him of everything he'd lost, not just his marriage, but the sense of truth that had guided his life. He would sit on the couch, staring at nothing, trying to understand how someone could betray so deeply without remorse. He wasn't angry anymore, just hollow. But even in that emptiness, he made himself a promise. He wouldn't let her break him completely. She had taken his trust, but she wouldn't take his will to rebuild. And as painful as it was, Ethan knew walking away was the only way to finally start healing. Months passed, and life slowly began to settle into a strange kind of quiet for Ethan. The pain hadn't disappeared, but it had softened. He had learned to live with the emptiness, to let the silence heal him instead of hurt him. He poured himself into work, taking long hours at the shop, fixing cars, and saving every dollar he could. Little by little, he began to rebuild himself. Lauren's calls stopped after the divorce papers were finalized, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt free. There were no lies waiting at home, no tension in the air. Just peace, fragile but real. He rented a small garage space and decided to start his own business. It was risky, but it was his. He named it Miller's Auto Care, and soon people from all over town started coming by. They trusted him because he was honest and hardworking, qualities that had never left him, even after everything. While Ethan focused on his new life, Lauren's world was falling apart. Mark, the man she had risked everything for, had left her. When the truth about the DNA test became known, his pride couldn't handle the shame. He cut ties with her completely. Lauren tried to find work, but struggled to keep up with the bills. The house she once bragged about was slipping away, debt piling higher each month. One evening, out of nowhere, Lauren showed up at Ethan's shop. He was under a car, his hands covered in oil, when he heard her voice for the first time in months. "Ethan," she said softly, "I need your help." Her tone was desperate, her face tired and hollow. She explained that Mark had left, that the bills were too much, that she didn't know where else to turn. Ethan stood there quietly, wiping his hands with a rag. For a moment, he just looked at her, the woman who had once shattered his heart without a second thought. He didn't feel the anger he expected. There was no satisfaction, no revenge burning inside him. Only calm acceptance. "You made your choices, Lauren," he said quietly, meeting her eyes. "Now you have to live with them." She started to cry, begging him to reconsider, but Ethan didn't waver. He wasn't cruel, he was simply done. He had spent too many years saving someone who never valued him. Now he was saving himself. As Lauren left, he went back to work. The hum of the tools and the smell of oil grounded him, reminding him of how far he'd come. His business grew quickly after that. People respected his skill and honesty, and soon Miller's Auto Care became one of the top-rated shops in the area. He hired a small team and even started mentoring younger mechanics who reminded him of himself years ago. Ethan's quiet success became its own form of revenge, not loud, not cruel, but powerful. He didn't need to ruin Lauren's life. She had already done that on her own. His strength came from walking away and building something better from the wreckage. Every night, as he locked up the shop and looked at the glowing sign with his name on it, he felt a deep sense of peace. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He had lost everything once, but by choosing silence and self-respect, he had won back the one thing that mattered most, himself. Time moved quietly, and Ethan had learned to live a calm and steady life. He no longer woke up with anger in his chest or sadness in his heart. His business was running well, and he had found peace in simple things. The smell of oil, the hum of machines, the comfort of honest work. He didn't expect anything more from life. He thought that part of his story, the family part, was over for good. But one Saturday afternoon, while he was closing up the shop, he saw two familiar faces standing by the entrance. It was Emma and Noah. They were older now, teenagers, taller, and quieter than he remembered. His heart stopped for a second. He hadn't seen them in months, not since the divorce. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. But before he could speak, Emma walked up and said softly, "Hi, Dad." Those words hit him harder than anything else ever had. His throat tightened, and he could only nod, trying to hide the emotion in his eyes. They talked for a while, awkward at first, but soon the distance melted away. Noah looked around the shop and smiled. "So this is what you've been building," he said. Ethan laughed quietly and replied, "Yeah, this keeps me busy." Then came the moment that truly changed everything. Emma looked straight at him and said, "We know the truth now. Mom told us everything." Ethan froze, unsure how to react. She continued, her voice calm but firm. "You may not be our biological father, but you'll always be our real dad." For a few seconds, Ethan couldn't speak. His eyes filled with tears he didn't bother to hide. He had spent months believing he had lost them, that the truth would erase all the love they once shared. But here they were, standing in front of him, choosing him despite everything. Noah nodded and said, "You're the one who was always there, Dad. You taught me how to ride a bike, fix a car, and never give up. That's what a real father does." Ethan's heart felt heavy and light at the same time. All the pain, all the betrayal, suddenly seemed smaller compared to this moment. He hugged them both tightly, feeling their warmth, their forgiveness, and their love. It wasn't the same as before, but in a way, it was even more real. The truth had stripped away everything fake and left only what mattered, the bond they had built through love and care. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, thinking about what had just happened. He realized that family wasn't defined by DNA or last names. It was defined by love, effort, and the memories shared. The years he spent caring for Emma and Noah weren't wasted. They were the best years of his life. As he looked at an old photo of them on his phone, Emma with her first baseball glove, Noah covered in grease from helping in the garage, he smiled. The past had hurt him, but it had also given him something beautiful. He didn't just lose, he also gained something unbreakable. Ethan finally understood that love wasn't about who you come from. It was about who shows up for you day after day. And that's exactly what he had done. In that quiet moment, surrounded by peace, he whispered to himself, "Maybe this is what forgiveness feels like." For the first time in years, Ethan's heart was light. He had come full circle, from betrayal and heartbreak to peace and understanding. The pain that once defined him had turned into strength. And as he turned off the lights and locked up his shop for the night, he knew one thing for sure. Some bonds are written not in blood, but in the heart, and those never fade. Years passed, and life slowly settled into something calm and ordinary again. Ethan had learned to live with what had happened. The pain had softened with time, and what was once anger had turned into quiet acceptance. His shop was still running strong, and he had built a good life on his own. There were still hard days, but they didn't break him anymore. He had learned how to breathe again, how to smile without pretending, and how to find peace in small things. The sound of the morning radio, the hum of engines, the smell of fresh coffee in the shop. One sunny afternoon, Ethan's phone buzzed. It was a message from Emma, a link to a live stream. "I thought you might want to see this," she wrote. He tapped it open and saw her standing on a graduation stage, wearing a cap and gown, smiling proudly as her name was called. He froze for a moment, staring at the screen with tears gathering in his eyes. He couldn't be there in person, but she had made sure he was still part of her day. That small act meant more to him than any apology ever could. As he watched her accept her diploma, his heart filled with a mix of pride and peace. He whispered softly to himself, "That's my girl." After the ceremony, Emma called him. Her voice was filled with excitement. "Dad, did you see it?" she asked. Ethan laughed gently and said, "I wouldn't have missed it for the world." For a few minutes, they talked about her plans, her dreams, and how she wanted to visit him soon. When the call ended, Ethan sat quietly in his chair, letting the silence wrap around him. He thought about everything that had happened, the lies, the heartbreak, the years of confusion. There was a time when he thought his life had ended the day he got those DNA results. But now he realized it hadn't ended. It had just changed. He didn't lose everything. He simply learned what really mattered. Lauren's betrayal had once felt like the end of his world, but now, looking back, he saw it as the start of his truth. She had broken his trust, yes, but she hadn't broken his spirit. He had found a strength he never knew he had, and in the process, he discovered who truly cared for him. Emma and Noah had come back to him not because of obligation, but because of love. That was something no DNA test could erase. As the sun began to set, Ethan stepped outside the shop. The air was warm, the sky painted in shades of orange and gold. He looked up, smiled, and whispered, "You broke my heart, Lauren, but you didn't break me." It wasn't said with anger, it was said with peace. He realized that betrayal could take away a lot of things, trust, comfort, even years of your life, but it couldn't take away your truth. And the truth was simple. Ethan had loved with everything he had. He had given his best, and that made him whole, even if life hadn't gone the way he expected. As he locked up for the night, he glanced at the photo hanging in his office. One of Emma and Noah when they were little, covered in dirt and laughing beside his old truck. For a long time, that picture had hurt him. Now it made him smile. It reminded him that love, even when built on broken ground, can still be real. He walked home under the quiet evening sky, feeling lighter than he had in years. Life hadn't been kind, but it had been honest. And that honesty gave him peace. Because in the end, Ethan hadn't really lost a family. He had found out who truly deserved his love. Broken Heart Sparkles.